Welcome to the Rising from the Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Amy Grace. Obsessed with coffee, cowboy boots, and deep relationships, I'm on a mission to help you find the gold in your story through faith, family, and wellness. Because I believe your story can break you wide open to live a beautiful, abundant, and vibrant life. I'll share with you how the hard seasons and difficult circumstances can become a catalyst of growth that often lead into some of the most beautiful stories we've ever told. I'm so grateful you're here. Grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Welcome back, friends. Let's talk nutrition today. In this episode, you won't find a to-do list or a to-eat list or a to-supplement with list. As someone who has struggled with disordered eating, I wanted to take you a little deeper than a list of rules to follow. Alexa is a health coach, entrepreneur, and almost board-certified nutritionist. Alexa's background in psychology and her expertise in nutrition equip her with the tools to not only educate on nutrition, but also the why behind it all. Understanding the why and the psychology behind your nutrition habits can play a key factor in the success of your nutrition goals. Discover how comparison, diet culture, and a one-size-fits-all beauty standard can keep you trapped in a vicious cycle of yo-yo dieting and chronically feeling stressed out by nutrition. After working with Alexa for over the past year, I knew I wanted her to share some of the highlights we have discussed in my own personal health journey. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Listen in. So it's really interesting because when I came to you, I think it was like beginning of last summer to start working with you. It was like April or May. It's almost been a year, I feel like. But when I originally came to you, I really wanted you to give me like a written, spelled out meal plan and like a supplement list and like give me the plan and I'll follow it to a T. I won't deviate. Like, just tell me what to do. And you basically were like, no, that's not how I work. And honestly, I was a little disappointed, Alexa. I was like, dang it. Like, I don't want to have to work hard. I want you to do it for me. And I don't know that like consciously, I don't know that I thought that, but I was like, it felt a little frustrating right off the bat, but like the discovery from having to work through all the things has been so, so beneficial. So thank you for not giving me my way, making me do a little bit of digging.
Of that.
So it was funny because like, I did the food journal and I was coming into this like, oh yeah, I'm a fairly healthy person. Like I work out fairly consistently. I mean, for the most part, I eat healthy. I just felt like crap. Well, I do the food journal and like come to find out I make a lot of bad food choices. I remember just like realizing how much like just like out to eat and like grab this quick snack and like the awareness around that was mind-boggling in the beginning. I was like, oh my gosh, like I really don't eat healthy. But then like we had to like dig into my health background just a little bit because like the food journaling prompted a few, intrusive thoughts of like, well, see, now you're just this bad person. There was just a lot of shame wrapped around that from the past. And, we had talked about it of like, hey, maybe tracking's not the best thing for this season, that kind of thing. But I do feel like it was helpful for the awareness piece. Like I needed that. And then just the awareness of like, why is this triggering me? We started with like some really basic concepts, or at least they felt really basic to me. I have a tendency to like overcomplicate things, like give me like a really complex plan that like feels challenging. And so you gave me some basic things like, hey, why don't you eat whole foods and hydrate and delay your coffee? And I was like, that sounds too easy. No way. But you also like, you gave me a lot of like the mindset behind that. Like you really made me dig into like the why, like why am I making that choice? Why is that something that I'm thinking, that kind of thing, which I feel like was really, really beneficial. And helped me uncover a lot of things that I didn't really realize that I was still struggling with. And it just gave me the opportunity to really come back and combat those lies of like, hey, that's not truth. That's not who I am. Like, and I get the ability, like I have the ability to make a new choice from here. And just kind of like rewrite like the next chapter. And I don't have to continue to carry those, body image lies, for lack of better words, with me. But you mentioned that you have a background in psychology. So I want you to tell us just a little bit about your education journey and how that psychology background really plays into the nutrition aspect, because I absolutely love it.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is a big one. So I originally thought I was going to go to medical school. That was like
Oh,
my
wow.
yes. And freshman in college, I mean, I was always into like the sciences, but I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to go to med school. And about a year in, I would say by my sophomore year, I started with like all the sciences, which I loved. But by sophomore year, I was like, no, I definitely don't want to work in a hospital. It's not for me. I think honestly, like on a personal side note, I had some family members that were really sick and I had to visit them in hospitals. And I think that just left an imprint on me. And I decided, no, I want to be on the other side of things where I'm helping prevent people from coming here.
I love it.
So
I love it.
that unwrapped some of that. But then I was kind of up in the air. I wasn't really sure because at that point, I hadn't really fully delved into nutrition yet. Like I was regularly practicing exercise. I was eating what I thought was healthy, but I hadn't really dove into, oh yeah, nutrition is what I want. So I was trying to figure it out. I was thinking physical therapy. I knew I wanted to do something with the body. And I ended up landing in psychology because I realized that I had loved it so much. And I've always had this like fascination with people and observing people and people's mannerisms and their behaviors and why they do the things they do. So that really took me down that road. And so that's why I got my degree in that. But after that, I really was into personal training, group fitness training, then really started diving into nutrition, but more from the perspective of the health coaching side of things, of like people's behaviors. And like I said, why people do the things that they do and what causes that. And then that took me down the path of like a lot of people's food behaviors present day are usually triggered from their food story and what their food was like for them growing up in their home all throughout their younger years and teenage years. And I'm like, there's definitely some deep psychology behind that, right? And so just kind of like what you had said, where you have had to do a lot of reprogramming of your habits and these thoughts that come into your mind still. And that's because you had those for so long that it just click and change overnight, right? It's like a reinforcement that we constantly have to give our brains. And I think a lot of times people don't know that that's a part of like the healing journey and that they have to do those practices to actually have better nutrition habits, right? Like people don't usually think the brain-based stuff or like their habits or psychology plays a role in nutrition, but it plays a huge foundational role.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, that is so cool. So tell me, what is your actual title now?
So technically, I am a health coach, but I have my master's in nutrition.
Okay, that's
and
what I thought.
Yes, and I'm on the path to becoming licensed in nutrition. So to be a licensed nutritionist. I still have a couple more. I'm technically in like the internship phase right now. So basically just doing the supervised practice hours. I have to take the board exam pretty soon. So once those things are done, I can apply for my license. So
I love
yeah,
it.
it's I'm in the phase right now.
Yeah, so exciting. All the hard work. So I feel like that was a huge component, obviously. And I thought it was really interesting too, Alexa, like working through that whole process. And it came up in conversation that I had this running list of bad foods, quote unquote, bad foods. And I feel like it probably came from just reading like random articles on the internet around like fitness and diet and all of that. I remember when all of this started for me back when I was like 15, 16, like my whole quest, for lack of better words, was like beach body diet. Like those were all the key words. I want you to just to talk about a little bit like diet culture, beauty standards, and the stress that creates, especially like in the female mind. Like we have this cultural standard of what beauty is, what pretty is supposed to be. And then we're all coming and trying to fit into that one standard or that one mold. When in reality, like all of our bodies are different. We've all been through different experiences. And I feel like that influences a lot of things. But just give me a little bit of your thoughts behind diet culture, beauty standards, and the stress that creates in the female mind.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, diet culture. Let me tell you. So social media, I feel like has made diet culture even worse because when we think about it, like, was diet culture existing before social media? Absolutely. Like it started, I don't even know where it started. Actually, that would be interesting to look into. But if you think about back when like our parents were growing up, their phase of food was like, oh, let's make sure you have low fat. Like don't eat fat. Fat isn't good for you and it causes X, Y, and Z. So that definitely was a huge component of it. And I think it just all started unraveling from there. And, you know, newspapers, magazines, that's really where a lot, and probably the news too. People, once TV started coming out, then the internet hit. And then it just, I feel like it just hit the roof, right? Because we have social media accessible in our phones and the internet accessible to us 24/7. I mean, if you can imagine the level of impact that has on our brains and our thoughts. And so health is not just about what you eat, right? It's about what are you actually reading? Who are you listening to? What are the thoughts that you're putting into your brain? Because that's imprinting on how the decisions you make about what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I think as human beings, it's normal for us to want to compare to each other, right? It's like we want to compare and we want to fit in and we want to see what other people are doing. But I think what's happening is we've lost that component of critical thinking for ourselves. Like we might look at what somebody else is doing and forget to say, oh, well, do I really want that for myself? Like, are we just blindly following or are we asking ourselves, is that really what's right for me? And I think I don't know, that started to kind of get deleted somewhere with people's process. And so now it's like diet culture is just, well, X, Y, Z, this person said X, Y, and Z is good for me. So I must need to follow that. And then without critically thinking about it, it's like this domino effect of like every new thing that comes out, even if it's like a study, someone will post a study and say, well, this study said that caffeine is bad for you, whatever. It's just an example. And so someone takes that for face value and says, well, this person has said that caffeine's bad, so it must be true. And without thinking, a lot of these studies can be poorly done. A lot of them are cherry picked, the information. A lot of people aren't even qualified to even talk about the results of a study because they actually didn't even read it for themselves, right? So it's like, but the thing with diet culture is it's like people want to sell the extremes, or they want to post the extremes because that's what sells, whether it's supplements, whether it's a diet plan, whatever it might be, their program. It sells it if they're like, this is what's going to get you results. And I think that just perpetuates people to have this all or nothing cycle of like, I must do this exactly or else it doesn't count and it's not going to get me results. And it feeds into that vicious cycle. And so I don't even know if I'm fully answering your question. I'm going round and round in circles here, but it has a huge impact, I think, on and especially with women more than men, I think, because we are very self-critical. Right. So
interesting. And I think it's so true. Like just people jumping on certain trends or whatever. And then like you get conflicting information. It's like, well, this fitness person said X, Y, Z, but this one's saying ABC. and this one's saying something different. So which plan am I going to
Yeah.
follow? And then you kind of have to like
Yeah.
pick and choose. And I feel like in today's culture of social media, it's almost like we're just kind of like scrolling their highlight reel. And it's like, okay, which one of these people do I like the most? And then I'm going to do
Yeah.
whatever they say. And like
Yeah.
their, whatever they say is Bible for me. Um, so that's really interesting. Just the way that, I don't know, social media comparison, diet culture, it all plays off of each other a little bit, I feel like.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like you'll have people that'll say, some people will come out and be like, well, I'm anti-diet culture. So let's eat intuitively and you should just eat whatever feels right to you and feels good to you. And it's like they take it to this other end of the extreme, right?
yeah.
Where it's like, honestly, it makes things more confusing. So I always tell people, like, if someone is preaching an extreme, go the other way because the extremes are
Mm,
not extreme diet culture and extreme anti-diet culture. Neither one is going to lead to probably the best result for
yeah.
any person. So let's meet in the middle. Let's find like a common ground and some balance. So
Yes.
anyway.
Yes. And I feel like you do such a good job, or at least my experience with you, of like navigating that middle ground of like, hey, like, let's not be so strict that like, you're miserable, but also like, hey, let's make sure that we're not going to the other extreme of like only eating, I don't know, ice cream. um, you know, and I do think like there is that middle ground. And I think, especially like as a mom, I think finding that middle ground became so important to me because I realized, and I think this is where like I really was struggling and it really pushed me to like reach out and like, okay, I've got to find some answers because like I had like my brain telling me one thing of like all of these diet culture myths, lies, whatever you want to say, of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I need to eat a certain way. And then like, I'm also raising children. I'm like, well, I don't want to feed them that. And then it became like, well, am I really going to make two separate meals every single time that I need to feed my family? Um, and I don't know, you just brought so much wisdom to that of like, hey, like if it's not good for them, why would it be good for you? But also on the other extreme of that, like, hey, like if you don't want to eat that, like if you realize like that's a poor health choice for you, why are you giving it to your kids to eat? And I was like,
Right.
oh shoot, she's right. I'll never forget the comment you made about like the pantry and snacks and stuff. And you're like, well, basically, if you are stocking it in your pantry, you're giving it to them as an option. And I'll never forget like ending that session with you and just thinking like, man, I really am responsible for that. Like, I really am the adult
Oh,
here. um, and I'm sure
yeah.
that there are still a lot of areas that I can improve on. But it was funny, like when I started to eliminate some of those more processed, refined things that probably weren't the healthiest choice and started to like incorporate a little bit more like whole foods, that kind of thing, even for my kids, it also did something in my brain of like, okay, like that's a nutritious snack for them. Hey, maybe it's not so bad for me. Um,
Mhm.
and I thought that was such a really neat concept. I would love for you just to touch a little bit on that of like, we are the adult and we do get to set kind of the environment of health in our own home.
Oh my gosh. Yes. This is such a good topic because I think a lot of times parents don't realize how much power they have over that whole
Mm-hmm.
situation, how much influence that they have over what their kids are learning to eat. And I feel like I come across so many parents, or at least I have in the past, that are always like they might have toddlers and they're always like, well, my toddler is such a picky eater, or they don't eat anything green, and look, I haven't walked in their shoes, so I don't know exactly, but I know when I see the other things that they're eating that, okay, is this a situation where your child just really doesn't want that and they don't like that truly? Or is it that they've been conditioned to eat differently because they might have not liked something the first go around? So because they didn't like it the first go around, maybe you said, well, I'm not going to try again. I'm just going to give them something different. Right? There's a component of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Or, right. Or, I definitely want to speak to the point of that parents are so busy. Like usually both parents are working full time and parenting. And parenting in itself is a full-time job. It is one of the biggest, most special, important jobs I think that anybody could have, because not only are you developing another human, right, to set free in society one day, but you're also going through a huge growth period and transformation yourself, because you've never done this before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's huge. And I think it's not to be taken lightly. And I wish parents would give themselves more credit. And I wish that they would give themselves more permission to just spend a little extra time with the hard stuff of like, because a lot of times I think they're just so tired that they're like, you know what? They don't want to eat broccoli. Who cares? Whatever. Fine. I'm just going to give them mac and cheese. I don't have the fight in me tonight. Right.
Probably have been there.
Right. And it's okay. Like, not to fault parents for doing that. I know it's going to happen, but it's like when you have the energy, like give yourself the time and the space, and I guess be a little more persistent when it comes to food with kids, because kids are learning. They're not going to love everything instantly, and they have to learn what is the proper way to eat. You're responsible for teaching them that. So this is literally something that they're going to grow with throughout their lives. And then when they're an adult, they're going to remember what food was like in their home growing up. Did you guys sit down and have home cooked meals? Or did you eat out all the time? Were meal times rushed? Were they in front of the TV? Were they allowed to be on video games while they were eating a meal? Did they help you cook? Did you teach them what to do in the kitchen? Like all these little things have such a huge impact on how that child is going to grow and treat food as an adult. I really believe that. So, not to blame parents, but it is a huge responsibility. And depending on how it goes, there might be a lot for that adult to unpack one day if things weren't as good growing up. So, that's just a couple thoughts about it. But, it's a big topic. So
it is. I just thought it was so interesting. Like when you really it's almost like you take back that power of like, okay, my 3-year-old is not going to tell me what they're going to eat. Like I'm the parent. I'm the one that's cooking. Like you're going to eat what we're having for dinner. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Easier said than done for sure. But it is funny to like, you can watch their little palates like change over time. And I think that has been the coolest thing of like, a couple nights ago, the boys ate celery. I mean, sure, it was cooked into a meal, but before, I don't think they ever would have eaten celery.
Wow. That's definitely progress.
Yeah. So it's just funny to watch their little palates change, and even just like their willingness of like, it is really hard in the beginning, but when you kind of like, you are persistent, at least to a certain degree. It's funny just to watch them change. Anyways.
That's really, really cool. I love that.
Yes. So Alexa, just changing topics just a little bit. When I came to you last summer, I feel like in my head, I knew a lot of like the right nutrition choices, like I knew how to meal prep. I knew how to count macros. I knew how to work out. I wasn't coming to you like completely clueless, but like I had reached a point where like I could not implement any of that stuff on my own. It was like my tank was empty, which is funny because I didn't necessarily look awful on the outside. Like it wasn't like I had just like let myself go completely, but I felt horrible. Like I was tired all the time. I would go to sleep and then like I would wake up and feel like I hadn't slept at all. I felt like I couldn't focus. I was really struggling with my skin. And so when I came to you, I thought I wanted that hardcore, like regimen of like, just tell me what to do. I just want to feel better. And you actually gave me kind of the opposite of what I thought we would do. And it actually turned out to be like the best thing. It almost like forced me into this place of like, hey, maybe you need to slow down. Hey, maybe you don't need to be quite so strict. Strict as in like my mindset, because my choices definitely were not strict. But I feel like the big things that we hit on, at least right off the bat, was like rest, reducing stress, reducing decision fatigue. And those things were like completely foreign to me. But tell me how stress directly impacts our health, especially as women, like hormones, all the things are all combined and tied together.
Absolutely. So yeah, it really comes back to the foundational things, right? And you listed a couple of them, and stress is one of them. And I think what I really was trying to do with you and just with clients in general is like empower you to know how to come back to those foundational things, because I'm not going to be around all the time. And how do you build trust within yourself to be able to check in with yourself on those foundational pieces? And I think that's such a wonderful skill that we all need to develop, instead of like looking to someone else for answers all the time. Like, how do we look within and trust our own intuition and gut on things? So that's kind of like a sidebar. But when we don't do this, it's like we're in this constant wheel of chasing something, chasing answers, chasing symptoms, chasing a solution. And that in itself adds a lot of stress to the body. So stress in itself, right? Acute stressors are very normal. Our body is actually very equipped to deal with acute stressors and bounce back to a place of homeostasis when the nervous system is balanced, right? Our body always wants to get back to homeostasis, which is balance. And what happens is that life today, we might have an acute stressor, but then we have another one, and then we have another one and another one all day long, back to back to back. And our nervous system just stays in this place of fight or flight instead of being able to go back to rest and digest. So it's a sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. But essentially, because of just everything I think people take on today, just between work, parenting, even something like exercise, like people don't realize that when your system is so taxed from all these other things that you do on a day-to-day basis, right? Like that overload of everything that you're involved in, your body's already kind of in this overburdened place. And then you go and try to exercise thinking, well, this exercise is healthy for me. It's going to help. It's going to relieve stress, which in a sense, sure, it probably helps relieve some mental stress, helps you disconnect from whatever might have happened that day. But you have to remember that it's creating a physical stress on the body. So if your body is already physically depleted from so much back-to-back stress, is adding another stressor in, even if it's a quote unquote healthy stressor, is it okay? Or is it going to tip the scale more in the opposite direction that you want to go? So I think it's important for people to take a step back and look at all of that. Like, what's the overall stresses on the body? Because what happens is when our nervous system remains in this fight or flight constantly, we are releasing these stress hormones constantly. And eventually you get to this place of fatigue and burnout because the body just can't keep up. And things that just leads to a whole cascade of all kinds of other issues, right? Like hormones, symptoms, like you listed a couple of them today that you were experiencing, even just like a general day-to-day fatigue. Or even apathy, it starts to affect like your mental stance on things too. Like you might get to this place where you're like, I'm just so tired. I don't even feel anything. I don't even have an emotional reaction to whatever, right? It's like you're just so removed. So it accumulates, and it's a recipe for disaster. So we have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our nervous system. We have to incorporate these practices that help get us back into that rest and digest state so that we can balance out all the fight or flight. And I think with women, especially women take on a lot. Not only are we
Yeah.
self-critical of ourselves, right? Like, but we just take on so much. Like you're a mother and you also work a full-time job. So
True.
that's you're doing two jobs in addition to like normal household stuff. So it's a lot. And I think women just try to keep up. We think
Mm-hmm.
that like this just must be what we have to do. This is life. Like these things need to be done. But I want to encourage you to give that a little pushback, you and all women, like push back into that a little bit where it's like, do you need to be doing all these things? Is there
Mm-hmm.
anything that you can remove? Is there anything that you can outsource? And like really think through that process of like, okay, well, if I outsource like my house cleaning, for example, maybe
Mm-hmm.
like twice a month, somebody come and help me clean my house, right? Can you afford it? Obviously, that's one thing to look at. And is the amount that you pay for that, is it going to be worth it for you to take that load off of yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just little things like that. Where can we just, because we're not supposed to live life in this stressed out state all the time, feeling like
Mm-hmm.
just running on fumes. It's just, that's not how life is meant to be. So
Yes. Yes. Preach. And I think that's funny too, because something that we talked about a lot, Alexa, was like um, almost like time management of like brain dump all the things that you think are on your to-do list. And then like, are all of those things really things that have to be done? Or like, are they just things that are floating around in your head that don't really matter? And I think it was like last month, I finally was just like, okay, for our house to run smoothly, these are the things that need to be done first thing in the morning. And these are the things that need to be done before we go to bed. And if those things are done, a lot of the other stuff kind of takes care of itself. And it was really neat because I like ended up like putting it on a little card, printed it out, stuck it on the refrigerator, and me and my husband were able to like tag team. And it was like if I was at work and didn't get home until like 8 o'clock that night, he already knew like the things that needed to be done before we could go to bed. And so it was like he already would have like half the list checked off before I even walk in the door. And so then it was like, okay, like let's just tag team these last couple of things and then we can go take a shower, go to bed. Whereas like
yeah,
before I felt really frustrated, I would walk in and then it would be like I felt overwhelmed as soon as I walked in the door of like, okay, well, now I've got to do all of these things. And I've also, either have like all of these tasks to do tomorrow or I've got to go back to work tomorrow. And it just like, it made me feel really like pressed for time versus like, hey, these are the 5 or 6 things that have to be done, make our day run smoother. And like, hey, you've already checked off half the list. That's like, more time that we get together, or hey, more time that we actually get to sleep.
yeah,
Because sometimes as parents, like our plates really do feel really full. And I think it comes down to like prioritizing. And like you said, like outsourcing some of those things, if that's an option, like it can really alleviate just some of the internal like mental stress that may not even be there if we just like wrote it all out of like, oh, that actually doesn't have to be done, or oh, that's actually like a 2-minute task. And then I don't have to think about it anymore.
so true. And on that note, so I'm so glad to hear that because I remember when we last talked, you were working on that and you were going to do like the
Yes.
time audit. So if it's an option for whoever's listening, lean into your spouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? Also, if you have children, depending on their age, like outsource some tasks to them. Get them to
Yeah.
learn what it's like to keep up with regular life management because that's going to set them up for success in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last point I wanted to just say really quick to kind of follow up on what you just said was our brains immediately want to go to the easy tasks first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like when you write that list and you have all these things, and probably half of them are like quick, easy tasks that could be checked off, and done quickly. And it's like that dopamine response of like, oh, yes, I could get this done and I can get this done. And so immediately we want to go to the small little things that can be done easily. But what happens is it leaves all the big stuff left over. And by the time we get to that point in the day, we're tired.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to think about the big stuff. It feels like too big to take on. So it ends up getting pushed back, and those big things just grow and grow and grow. And it feels like they're accumulating, and they're just this elephant in the room. And so one of the best pieces of advice that I got is, I think that it's a saying like, eat the frog, right? It's like, do the big stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
All the little stuff that like you can kind of do some of it probably subconsciously, or
Yeah.
just while you're listening to music or a podcast. It's like, leave that just to the side. What are like the top two or three big things? Tackle those in the beginning of the day when you have the most energy and the most like mental clarity. Get those done and out of the way. And usually it takes less time than you think it will.
Mm-hmm.
Number one. Number two, it's an amazing feeling when you actually finish it and you get it out of the way. You feel so accomplished. And then, depending on what time it is in the day, you might have an hour to just like run through a bunch of those little tasks that you don't even take that much energy for you to do. It's just simple and feels good to check off. So
Yes.
that's kind of my about that. But
I can attest that really does work. It will
yeah.
change your life.
Yes.
So Alexa, going back to a little bit more like nutrition based, sorry, got on a rabbit trail there. But when I came to you, I was kind of like, just tell me like the foods and the supplements I need to take, and then I'll do it, and like it'll fix all of my problems. And you really like made me dive into like the quality of food choices. Um, and I think that has been really helpful, even in just like feeding my family, picking out snacks, like, hey, what am I going to, eat for lunch? Just all of these things that probably beforehand I didn't necessarily plan super well. It was just kind of a whatever I can grab really quick, like I'm on the go, like I need something fast. And then I basically asked you, I was like, hey, like, will this greens drink, like if I just take that, like that'll fix all my problems, right? But tell me, like, give me a little bit of the why behind the quality of our food choices. Just go there for a minute.
Okay. So, oh gosh. Quality today is tough because the food industry has produced so many food items that are processed and packaged, right? And they're non-perishable for long periods of time. But a lot of times those types of foods can be void of the major essential micronutrients, all those vitamins and minerals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're stripped of it and then re-fortified with it, with sometimes a synthetic version. So it's just not the same as getting like vitamins and minerals straight from the whole food source when you're mostly consuming a lot of processed packaged foods, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I always say go back to the whole foods, right? Now, unfortunately, because of how our food system and our farming system has played out these days, we also have this whole I guess, opportunity or this idea of, okay, well, should I be buying organic versus do I have to worry about that? Like, is organic just a hoax? I've had people even just say, like, is organic even a real thing? And the thing is like everything used to be organic because 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, there really wasn't that much processed food available to us. Not the level of options that we have available today. I mean, you walk in a grocery store and you can just see all the aisles of options. It's
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming. But we didn't used to have that. And now it's like option overload. And the problem is that the way that conventional produce is farmed, a lot of it is sprayed with chemicals, right? To get
Mm-hmm.
it to be resistant to bugs so that the crop the crop has a good yield so that they can sell. But what we're starting to see is that with these practices, the nutrient status of the produce is changing and the soil health is changing. And really, a lot of the nutrients in our food come back to how nutritious, how nutrient dense is our soil? Is
Mm-hmm.
it depleted from being over farmed, right? Or is it abundant because the farming practices are the way that they're supposed to be, the way they always were in history? So that's like going like way back to the root. That's another huge thing too. So when it comes to organic, it's like, well, really what you should be asking is, how was the produce that you're eating, the whole foods that you're eating, how was it farmed? Same thing with animal proteins and all that. How were they farmed? How were they raised? Because that has a huge impact on the quality as well. So I won't elaborate too much on from there because this is such a huge topic, but hopefully that kind of explains a little bit how it can affect like the vitamins and the minerals and all of those micronutrients that our bodies really thrive off of.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like one thing that you kind of like, maybe not stressed, but kind of like brought to my attention was like, it's best to eat like a whole food versus just taking a supplement to fill in your diet. Tell me the difference, or just like give me your reasoning behind like why you would encourage someone to focus on an actual, like, say consuming like, 5 to 6 servings of vegetables a day versus like, oh, I drank my greens drink, so I'm good to go. I don't have to eat a single vegetable today. Give me a little bit of your why.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So firstly, along with those whole foods, with all the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, you're also getting the cofactors that help your body to digest and absorb those micronutrients, right? And when we just get it straight from a supplement, whether it be a greens powder or even like a capsule in a bottle, they're in different levels of amounts than it would be contained in a food. So it's actually easy to overconsume specific types of vitamins and minerals from a supplement, because it's, when we eat a whole food, our body's going to basically take what it needs from the whole food and excrete the rest. Not only that, the whole foods are coming along with fiber, protein, fat, carbs, right? So it's like you get the full package of everything. The body is familiar with it. As long as you have a good, healthy, working digestive system, the body's going to do what it needs to do to absorb what it needs and get rid of the rest. With supplements, it's like a lot of these greens powders have proprietary blends where it's like, we actually really don't know a lot of times how much of each thing is in there when it's a proprietary blend. And even with the vitamins and minerals, like it'll tell us the exact amounts, but most people aren't really sure of like, what's the daily recommendation for the exact amounts? Like maybe they're thinking, oh, well, I really need to get a bunch of B vitamins because I'm low energy. So I need to just take these supplements with all these B vitamins. But it's like, do you have the cofactors of what you need to be absorbing and utilizing those B vitamins? If you're taking it in supplement form, you might just be getting tons of B vitamins and peeing them out, for lack of better, versus actually
world.
like absorbing. Yeah. So, food's a completely different story. So hopefully does that kind of like explain what you were looking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because I feel like I was probably one of those people in the beginning of like, just give me the supplement. And like, I don't really want to have to worry about like incorporating all these things into my diet. Like that just seems like a lot of work. But when you break it down to like, hey, these foods actually work together to nourish your body and to give you what you need, it makes so much sense. And you're just like, wow.
Yes. And like one quick example, super, super quick example is like, this is why it's so beautiful to combine foods together too. Vitamin C helps with the absorption of iron. So it's like, if you're somebody that's having issues with iron, you're low on iron, anytime you're going to eat a food with iron, pair it with something with vitamin C in it. And you're actually upticking your absorption in a natural way.
Yeah.
Versus like getting the body full of a synthetic iron pill, which can lead to an overage of iron and then cause X, Y, and Z issues. So that's a super quick example.
A whole nother topic, right?
Oh yeah.
Wow. I just feel like you've been so like influential in my health journey. Especially just like identifying, like, I don't think I realized how much stress I was bringing into just like the way that I made daily decisions. And I just feel like you've just brought so much light to that. But it really has been like the most simple things I feel like that have made like the biggest difference. And even though delaying coffee wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, it has been like life changing in the best way. Um, but as we wrap up our conversation, tell our listeners two or three of your favorite recommendations when it comes to like reducing stress with nutrition and like getting tangible results, and maybe give us a little bit of the why behind each of those. Um, I know like stress plays a really big part in our lives. And it's funny because, you know, we had touched on like when you're overly stressed, like, hey, maybe going for like a really hard workout isn't your best option. But we know like taking care of our body, like moving our body and eating well, that kind of thing, like it is healthy for us. Those are things that we do need to incorporate into our daily life. So give me just a couple recommendations of like, say someone is really stressed, their stress level is high, just in general, real life things that you can't necessarily take out completely. What would you recommend as far as reducing that stress and working to like give your body the nutrition that it needs?
Oh, well, you did, since you mentioned the coffee thing, and that's such a big one, we'll drop a little note about that and then go on to some others. But definitely that's a huge trend that I see with, well, I guess I'm going to say women because I work with a lot of women, but I know that men do it as well. But it's like waking up in the morning and having coffee on an empty stomach first thing. And it's a ritual for people, right? It's like and I'm a coffee lover myself. The aroma of it, the warmth of it, the way it tastes, like I love it. So I know that a lot of people, it's like a lot of times people are waking up in the morning and not feeling energized just right out of the gate. Like we're all, because of all these chronic issues that are happening, people are waking up and still feeling tired. They might not have gotten quality sleep the night before, or just, their bodies may be undernourished. So first thing in the morning, we want to reach for that coffee to give us that boost of energy, caffeine, but also just it kind of almost, I don't know, it's become this stress reliever for people to reach for coffee, I think.
Yeah.
For some, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
So it becomes this habit, and then it's like what happens is so caffeine is going to deter our appetite a little bit. So then we have these busy, hectic, crazy mornings where all we've had is caffeine and no food. And I think that right there is a recipe for later cravings in the day, anxiety, just feeling a little balanced. So one of my favorite things is like, if you're able to switch that around, and I know you worked on this, but to our listeners, if you can really test yourself, wake up and within an hour have a nourishing breakfast. And when I say nourishing, I mean try to hit all your macronutrients. Try to get a solid portion of protein, a nice serving of fats, and a nice serving of complex carbs. Get some variety, and then let that sit for a moment before you go to the coffee and the caffeine. And just that one simple change, I can't tell you how many people, and myself included, I experienced this as well. But you and so many people that have made that switch are just like, whoa, like that's huge that's huge. So that's a big one. And oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of your original question just with like favorite things for like reducing stress, right?
Yes.
Because there's a couple ways to go about it where it's like things that can reduce the mental stress load of nutrition, but also maybe even the other avenue we could talk about is like the stress load of like physically on the body from the things that we're taking in our food and our water, right? There's like certain toxicities that we come across on a day-to-day basis. And when the body is really stressed and we've used up a lot of our nutrients to be able to deal with that stress, the body then becomes in like more depleted state. Are we replenishing at the rate that we're depleting it from the stress, right? So like from that perspective, if we can get a lot of variety in our diet, if we can eat as whole foods based as possible and get good variety, you can actually infuse in a lot of these vitamins and minerals that we need to combat the stress from an internal standpoint. And then on top of that, if you can identify, well, where can I reduce maybe my exposure to certain chemicals that are in the environment, right? Whether it's like, making sure you have a good filter system on your water to make sure you're filtering out any of the toxicities and like chlorine and heavy metals. Sometimes there's tons of stuff that can end up in water, right? So it's like a good filtration system, good quality water can just take some of that toxic burden off of your body, which then relieves some of the stress load on the body, right? From another perspective, just last final thought is when people are getting stressed about nutrition, it's like just simplify, come back to the basics, don't overcomplicate it. And again, like outsource where you need it. Can you afford to maybe do a meal prep delivery service or like one of those companies that sends you the kit of what you need to cook and it's all there and you don't have to worry about figuring it out? It's like those options. I mean, we're so lucky that these didn't used to exist, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like we have all these options. It's almost like for as busy as people are, the industry has made it more convenient for us, but just as easy and convenient as it is to eat unhealthily or to eat convenience foods, right, that aren't maybe necessarily the best for us, it's actually pretty easy to achieve getting healthy options as well. You just have to be aware of them, and you have to look at like how can you infuse that into your life?
Yeah.
And I think that can reduce stress as well. So
yes, I love it. Alexa, tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can follow along if they're interested in working with you. Just tell us all the things.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am literally right in the middle of doing a website.
Okay.
So in the works. So I have the domain name, but if you go to it, there's nothing there because it's not launched yet. So, but I would say, my email and also Instagram is another place that I'm kind of resetting to kind of coincide with my business, my nutrition offerings. But Vitality by Alexa is the Instagram handle, and then vitalitybyalexa@gmail.com is the best email. So that's like really the best way to reach out at the moment, but there'll be more down the road.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Of course. It was so nice. So great to chat with you.
Yes. Always love anytime I get to pick your brains.
I love it. We got to do it again.
Yes, let's do it again. But I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.